Just going to set myself up here with some screenshots, etc. So a very, well, I should say good afternoon, good morning, good evening to you all, wherever you are on planet Earth. And thank you for joining us today on what I hope is a interesting sort of sharing really of my journey in the digital media arena. Belated, but a very happy new year to you. I hope all your celebrations went well, and I hope your year brings you all the success that you richly deserve. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see the screen up there, starting off with the sort of placeholder for the session, leveraging digital media for risk management. It's not a big presentation, and I always say with these, it's all about GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. I'm going to share with you not, how can I put it, not some sort of enormous learning, but basically a story of my journey through digital media and how I've got to where I have. You might be asking the question, well, this is the IIRSM, we're into risk management. What's it got to do with risk management? The simple answer is you'll see how you can leverage digital media to sort of share your sort of risk management requirements within your organization. Some of you might be working on your own, some of you will be in companies, some of you might be just looking at it from a sort of a personal perspective. Perhaps you're doing qualification or something. So let's start. I'm going to firstly give you an idea of what this presentation is about, what it contains. So I'm going to set the scene, talk to you a little bit about how it all started, and then I'm going to talk to you about learning and development. What is the point of this leveraging of digital media? What is the objective? So I'm going to bring in the sort of thoughts on learning and development. And then I like this saying by Michael David Mitchell, which is perhaps all human interaction is about wanting and getting. Could be very apt for 2023. I think it is going to be a lot of interactive sort of work. We've just come out of COVID. A lot of countries are still in COVID. Some of my clients are still doing things virtually. So there's no doubt that digital media is here to stay. It was a small player in the background about 2-3 years ago. Then COVID came along, and you know what happened next. There was an explosion in the use of Zoom and WebEx and everything else. In fact, Zoom share price went through the roof. So after I've done that piece, it's a little bit about, so what now, 2023 and beyond. I think this is an important part for me because I have gone through a painful experience myself, a painful learning curve in terms of digital media. Hopefully by sharing those sort of details with you, it might stop you from having the same sort of painful experiences. Please do ask questions at the end. If there's a burning question you do feel like you want to ask, feel free to put it on chat. Sue's hopefully going to keep me on track, but we do want you to take part in this, get engaged, get involved, and then let's really sort of ignite some conversations. Let's set the scene, okay? Don't like to talk about myself, but a quick overview. Sunny Gopal, as Sue mentioned there, I'm involved with a lot of associations, certifications, etc. Just the usual sort of stuff that everybody has. I've really been involved with health and safety, workplace safety, process safety for over 35 years now. I'm sort of semi-retired now, and I do a lot of things purely because I'm passionate about what I do. I love what I do, and I like to share a lot of the content that I do free of charge as well. I do believe that only by sharing that knowledge can we actually get some improvements in the health and safety arena. Yes, of course, there has to be a commercial angle to these things as well, but there's a nice bit of give and take involved in these things. If you haven't come across any of my sort of media stuff before, you can find me on LinkedIn. Do hook up with me. Please get in touch. Let's have a chat. Let's connect, share, and learn, as I always say. I'm always learning, and hopefully we can call it the wisdom of crowds. We can all learn together. So what is my sort of digital experience? I did this slideshow way back in April of 2022 for IIRSM India. There was a lot of sort of questions involved there, and since then I've sort of added a bit more to it as well. Matrix, I should have taken the blue pill. It's certainly the case for me when it comes to looking at digital media. Where did it start? Well, before 2016, I was tinkering around. I was working for BP. I was in a staff role, and I had a lot of involvement with IT, a lot of sort of things that I was doing. You could say they were a little bit outside of the normal box, of Excel spreadsheets and various other things. I used to love coding. I still love coding, even though it's frustrating. And I spent, I would say, in excess of $50,000. That's personal money over a period of 10 years, whereby really I had nothing to show for it. So when I left BP in 2016, as most of you will recall, the oil prices dropped, and it was time for me to take the nice sort of package or whatever it is. Plus, my family was getting fed up with me going to some of these exotic locations which they sent me to. So it was time to sort of take a step back. So between 2016 and 2018, I took some time out to take reflection, take control. Obviously, it was a painful experience. £50,000, $50,000. You don't realize you spent $50,000 until you actually sit down and say, "Hey, what do I have to show for this? Where's it all gone?" And then suddenly it was sort of an eye opener. So I spent a lot of time doing things myself, learning how to do things myself, because it's easy to blame someone else from a digital perspective if they don't deliver, but really fundamentally it still came down to me. They were only doing things that I asked them to do. The problem is people are very good in trying to say, well, I'll give you a website, I'll give you this, I'll give you that. But the moment you want to put a full stop somewhere or change an image or do something, the clock is ticking, okay? So I had to take control, otherwise I'd be hemorrhaging more expenditure. Then in 2018 to 2022 was really where things started to pay off, that investment in learning and understanding how things are put together. And I don't mean in terms of coding and doing websites or those things. I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to be as an end user. I wanted to use the technology that was available to apply it to the sort of job that I'm doing as a risk and safety practitioner. So I don't want to sit there creating websites. I want them to be functional. I want them to do something for me. And between 2018 and 2022, there was a lot going on. In fact, I was saying to Sue prior to all this that I nearly had a nervous breakdown because of the volume of work that was involved. What do I mean by that? Well, imagine this. If you start a website or you start something in the digital arena where you want to do live events or you want to share some experiences, connect, share, and learn, it doesn't just stop there. It goes on and on and on. You have to create the videos, you have to create the content, you have people asking you questions on how to do certain things. So it's endless. Take the 24 hours a day, and if you want to sleep for 6 or 8 hours, it's very difficult to switch off. You can't just switch off from the digital world that easily. You need to have some downtime before you can go to bed. Otherwise, you end up really just thinking these things over. So came 2022, I took time out again because it's a process of evolution. As I started to learn more and more and more, I also realized that I was doing things a lot of things inefficiently. For example, why have 3 or 4 websites when one would do? Why have 3 or 4 social media channels when one was good enough? So you have to streamline, you have to do something in terms of how you're going to manage all this knowledge. And that's going to be similarly for yourselves if you're going to look at how you're going to leverage digital media. You go through the funneling process, you'll start somewhere and say, well, we've got all this stuff we're doing. Is it really paying off? What's going on? And you'll start filtering down. Then 2023, I left 2022. I had a better vision of what I wanted to do. And it was really where I sat down and said, well, what am I trying to do? What do I want to do with digital media? Firstly, I don't want vanity. I want sanity. So I've never looked at YouTube or looked at social media and said, oh, I've got a gazillion followers. That doesn't appeal to me because even with having 1,000 followers or 2,000 followers, it was difficult to manage. And plus, let's be honest, there's a lot of people out there who don't always like what you do, and they'll give you comments which you may not always like. you do learn, after a while, and you get a thicker skin, but it it still hurts, so you have to be careful. So I realized that what I want to do is to have a platform whereby I can share risk expertise, knowledge with the bigger community. That's all I want to do. I don't particularly think in monetizing any of these things. You get the odd bit of money coming through, but it doesn't really appeal to me. I am a mentor for a few people, so that's where I get my passion from in terms of sharing that expertise. So there you go. That was my sort of mission vision. I want to have a platform. I want to do something. I want to put it somewhere where people can access information and knowledge freely. And it's still along the same lines of parts of the world where people can't access that knowledge. There are parts of Africa where they have super fast broadband and internet, but they still cannot put a pair of decent shoes on their feet. So they would love to have access to that knowledge. So I needed a lever. I needed to find a way of how I can actually make that happen more 2023 and beyond. What can I do? Now, having done this a few times, I realized that it can be a very expensive process as well. And so it was really looking at myself and saying, I don't have an endless pot. What can I do? How can I make it happen? And on this slide, it's really where I talk a little bit more about the risks that are involved. And you can see on here, I didn't do anything different from all risk practitioners do, which is to identify, analyze, take action, monitor, and control. I wanted to make sure this time I didn't lose my sanity, and really wanted to make sure that I was adding value in some way to what I'm doing. Adding value. What do I mean by adding value? Well, firstly, it's about communication. I want to add value by communicating to the folks out there in terms of what to do, especially when it comes to risk management, how to do it. Think about it also in terms of support. And in support, there are people out there who may not always be willing to be forthcoming in terms of discussing some of the issues they've got, some of the lack of knowledge they've got or expertise. So want to provide a safe space for people to communicate their requirements. I'm a social butterfly. I like to engage in communities on LinkedIn or whatever. So I wanted to get community engagement as well, because you need that input from people, whatever you do in risk management, if you're going to try and improve things, because it is about continuous improvement. And of course, we need to develop the community. By developing a community and getting involved with people, communicating, you get the wisdom of crowds, and you start to then really start to flourish in terms of adding value overall. But also, more importantly, we talk about culture a lot when it comes to health and safety and risks and so on. So we wanted to create a culture of belonging. And that, of course, is involving diversity, inclusion, and equity, the EDI, as they say. Because belonging for me is where you create a psychologically safe environment. Now, some of you may have come across that expression of psychologically safe. And psychologically safe essentially means that there is no fear of speaking out. So really, by creating a sense of belonging, you want people to come to you, to approach you, or to someone on the platform and say, I don't know how to do this calculation. I don't know how to assess this risk. I don't know how to do this dynamic risk assessment. And you can have that engaging conversation there. Of course, all this means that we need to find a way of creating learning and development. How can we set something up? And that brings me to this next part about learning and development. If you've done anything on learning and development, you may have come across this triangle. Let me just grab a laser pen here. This is called Edgar Dale's cone of experience. And essentially what it's saying is you have ways that you can absorb or assimilate information. You read about it, you hear it, you see images, you watch videos, and it goes all the way down to you actually design, perform a presentation, do the real thing. But we can layer these and say, well, in terms of what do you remember? Well, people only remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see. But look right down at the bottom here, 70% of what they see, what they say and write, and 90% of what they do. So we're going to start talking about learning and development. We want to try and incorporate digital capabilities so that we can leverage on these requirements. And that is, we want them to be participating in workshops or collaborative lessons, experience sharing experiences. If you can hit the bottom part of this triangle, you're certainly going to make a big dent in terms of creating enhanced learning. So get into analyze, define, create, and evaluate. Sounds like a tall order, yeah? How do we make this happen? How do we get to that particular point? Well, there are two types of learning, active learning and passive learning. In active learning, where it's dynamic interaction and participation, passive learning is where it mostly promotes receptive skills like listening and reading. The challenge with digital media is a lot of the time people spend time listening and reading. YouTube, for example. How many of you out there, for example, have wanted to do something and maybe some repairs in a home or whatever, and the first thing you might go to is YouTube, and you find someone who's done a video, you watch them, you mimic them, you learn from them. So that's good. That's good in the sense that you have some sort of a learning from there. Active learning is where you've then applied it. You've actually taken that information, you've applied it, and you've seen, well, that's, you might sort of refine it in your own way, but you've applied that particular learning. Going back to our triangle then, on the learning pyramid, this is the sort of split between passive learning and active learning. So in active learning, we're doing practical applications, teaching others, and discussions. In passive learning, it's all about lectures, reading, audiovisual demonstrations. So this layered approach is how we want to sort of think about leveraging digital media. How can we use this technology that we have and not make people sit in a room and get Zoomed to forever or WebEx forever, but getting them involved, actually getting them to come on board so that they feel like they've actually been engaged and their brain cells are ignited, they've been stimulated. Because that's the only way we're going to get them to sort of keep that information in their head. Familiar diagram this, the hierarchy of controls. This is all about where is it most effective and least effective. If you think about passive learning and active learning, where do you think passive learning and active learning sits on this? Think about this for your particular organization or your situation. If you want to do something where you're looking at eliminating a risk, physically remove the hazard, what are you going to do? You're going to focus on active learning or passive learning. And this is sort of model that I've used when I've started to do things for clients. I've actually started to say, okay, what is it that you're trying to do in terms of risk management? We know that things like PPE, as example, COVID, wearing a mask and something, we know that there are lots of people who won't do it. There are those who will do it. So how can you change the dynamic? How can you change the landscape where people actually start to wear the mask? How does it come from active learning? Do they have to have COVID before they then suddenly realize I should have worn a mask? So anytime there's something involved with the risk and you're thinking about how to manage that risk or how to control that risk, bring in this concept of passive and active learning and Dale's triangle and see what you can do. Where do you leverage? What do you do to leverage it? Because once you've found that sweet spot of what you need to do, you can then maybe embrace the technology aspects that go with it. So for us, active learning would be really good right at the top. We want to be here in terms of illumination. Going right down the triangle would be the least effective, would be passive learning, because passive learning is about listening and reading and so on. Active learning is actually applying it. And the other thing I want to talk about is the VARK model. The VARK model, and I'm sorry, I'm going to deluge you, as I probably have, with some models and some concepts here, but it's important to get some structure on this. The VARK model is all about, it was by Neil Fleming and Colleen Mills in 1992. Talks about visual, auditory, reading, and kinesthetic. Okay, these are the different types of learners that you're going to have, or capabilities. visual learners, auditory learners, reading, writing learners, kinesthetic learners. Where are we now? Hierarchy of controls. You've got to manage the risk. You need to use digital technology. You need to get them to a point where you're looking more at how you're managing those risks. What type of learners do you have? Are they visual? Are they auditory? Do they require reading and writing or kinesthetic? Okay, that's the sort of focus approach in terms of applying digital media. Bit heavy session, important, because like everything, you've got to have some structure behind it if you're going to think about how you're going to use whatever tools you've got in your toolbox. When you go to do a risk assessment and you're looking at that risk equation of consequences and likelihood, you will have a bunch of tools in there which will help you decide what the risk is, high, medium, or low. Perhaps all human interactions about wanting and getting. Yeah, I mean, here we have 5 senses, okay? Vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. We perceive things and we interact. So that's how we are tuned to the environment. We see, we do, we act, etc. So we need to find a way. They call this the UI interface, user interfaces. So we have a person who's using all this tech, and all this tech is coming from somewhere. You know, the information is coming from somewhere. Okay, that gives us a good idea now. We know what we need to do. So we've got these 5 senses. We know what we're trying to do in terms of risk. We know what type of people we're dealing with. There's a lot of good stuff here in terms of a sort of a game plan. We need a toolbox, okay? So the next few slides are all about how I've sort of applied it, some of the tools that I've used. So it's what can we use? It's a little bit more about what I've used in the last 3 years to share this information. Okay, the question might be, well, how successful have you been sharing this information? I can only say that I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on the social medias. I said I'm not a big fan of those things, but you know, it's the way of engaging with the community that I want to develop. So talked about communities. And for me, I've used some very specific tools to get me to the point where people have understood risk a lot more. I get a lot of pleasure when people in parts of the world send me an email saying, hey, I never knew that about risk, you know, and I'm really grateful for the little video that you've done, and more importantly for the tool that you've shared, because now I can share that with my team in my company. I didn't do it for money. I did it because I wanted to help people in terms of understanding risk. We talk about safety a lot, but what we should really talk about is also risk and the combinations of consequences and likelihood. Tools I've used are specifically focused on SaaS. What is SaaS? Not the SAS, but SaaS. Well, SaaS is software as a service, okay? It provides users with remote access to specific software functions located in the cloud, right? The cloud. Costs money. Technology costs money, but if you use software as a service, you can get huge capabilities and firepower to do what you want at literally peanuts. I mean, little old me would probably have the same firepower in terms of delivering technology as some of the biggest companies on the planet, simply because there are a lot of people now providing software as a service. And IT expertise, well, do you need to be a super duper coder, programmer, a geek, a nerd, whatever you want to call them? Not really. You just need to know what the starting point is, what your end game is, how you would like to progress, what is your mission and what is your vision. Remember, my mission and vision is to have a platform whereby I can share knowledge and expertise with people 95% of the time free of charge. There's going to be some things that are going to be costed. We have to pay for this platform in some way or another, have to have some revenue stream. Okay, well, how do I do that? What is the journey so far for me? And 1822, I said, hello world, right? And in 2023 onwards, I want to do some of the things. Let me just spend a little bit of time on 1822 and tell you what happened. I used a lot of things, a lot of software as a service, and things creating such as live events. I used to live stream to LinkedIn. At one time, I think we had nearly 1,000 people on one of these live events. They came from all over the world. We had panels on there. We've had some incredible guests on there, people like Professor Scott Geller. We had the then Chief Executive Officer of NEBOSH, the President of IIRSM, Clive, was on. So we had a lot of live events going on, and also some very famous authors as well, for example, Tim Clark. They came to us because we were getting quite a lot of traction, and we were applying technology in a very sensible way. And they also realized that we weren't charging money, so they felt something quite honorable about it at the same time. So that was an example of what we did. Our YouTube channel just grew and grew and grew. We didn't monetize on any of that stuff, and it was nice. Very demanding. Took a lot of time to organize these live events, and trust me, when the lights and cameras on you, it can also affect your sleeping pattern as well. So we did really well on there. Very grateful to all the guests that came on there. What else did we do? Well, we had Academy. Some of these websites are all rolled into one now, and I'll explain where we are in 2023 onwards. Academy, we created a lot of tools, what I call interactive tools. So for example, we know what risk is, right? We know what the risk equation is, but have you actually applied it? And some people will give you this 5x5 matrix. So, well, we do this, we do that, etc. And I still have people saying to me, I don't quite understand. So I give them a tool and I say, here is a tool, have a look at it. And it's quite straightforward. There is a fantastic software as a service that I use by a company called Formaloo. And a lot of these software services providers, they do deals whereby you can have a lifetime commitment from them for you to access the software, and you might pay $50 or $100. Okay, now if you're very lucky, you might catch them very, very early in their development stage, and you almost are like an angel investor, and you get them at the right time, and they just flourish and grow, and you've got a fantastic software as a service for $50 or $60. Not bad, yeah. Formaloo was one of those that I got, which I thought was, well, fantastic. They've just increased the capabilities on there. You can now create forms and submits and all sorts of things, and they're so user-friendly, so easy to use. So I created a lot of these for things like hazardous substances reviews, cost readiness, how do you do a display screen equipment, how do you do a dynamic risk assessment. So lots of tools were developed, and I shared these through the various social media channels, and they were quite effective. Courses, another thing you can do with courses are that you can, we can all now make a website, right? We can make it on WordPerfect or Wix or whatever. They're cheap as chips now. You don't even have to employ someone to make these websites, because they're all WYSIWYG. You know, what you see is what you get. So you can create these courses, you can put them on there, and you can do that in your organization. You can create these courses. You don't have to get some company come in to develop it for you. Quizzes, remember Dale's triangle? No point deluging people with these things. You need to get them to interact. So I used a lot of interactive tools, creating quizzes, again, using Formaloo or some other software as a service to do that. And tools. Some of the tools I created were also dynamic risk check tools and a risk profiler. Clearly, there's a lot of things going on here, right? Checklists, courses, quizzes, tools, and you can see how time will just go so quickly, much to the annoyance of my wife. I used to spend hours on the computer sometimes fielding these things out. But I always thought it was a learning curve. You know, I always knew it wasn't sustainable, and so I will have to, look at a different model going forward. What did this do? I mean, the thing that all this did was it really got a lot of traction. I mean, companies such as L'Oreal, and they didn't mind me sharing this with you, companies such as L'Oreal showed real interest in what I was doing and how we were doing things. So they asked if I can help them with another person do some podcasts within their organization, because they felt that they had to leverage on digital media a lot more. Malcolm Staves, who's the group vice president of health and safety at L'Oreal, very smart chap, very forward thinking, got in touch and said, let's create some podcasts. And we did, I think, about 10 podcasts in 1 year. And the Malk's boss, who's even higher up, said, I never realized that was what safety is. So these are the sort of things that happen as a result of those podcasts. There's that light bulb moment, okay? And very grateful for Malk, because he showed a lot of commitment in terms of having belief in what we were doing, and also the end result proved it as well. I'm still doing a lot of things for Malk, and we've now advanced it even further. We've now created what I call micro courses for them, whereby a course is created and people are interacting in that course, not just watch the box and away you go. People are actually getting involved with it as well, with discussions. Some more things here in terms of how you can get people, I said interaction there, how you can get people to interact with what you are presenting. So I use a whole bunch of things. I use Slido, where you have PowerPoint slides and you can do quizzes on there. Padlet is good because it allows you to have group sort of thinking on topics. Mentimeter is good. They're like word cloud type approaches. And all these other things. Kahoot, well, I'm sure nearly all of you have heard of Kahoot. It's used so much. Of all of these now, the one that I use a lot is Kahoot. I found the others all just pale into comparison compared to Kahoot, because with Kahoot you create, it's gamification. You get people to actually get involved in the games and create competition. Competition breeds success, okay? And they love that interaction. Golden tip: give them some content, let them learn from it, let them engage with you. Remember that Dale's cone triangle, and then get them involved with it. Then you have to start getting them to apply it, which is the active learning piece. And Kahoot is a great way of testing that knowledge and reinforcing the learning. Also have a newsletter on LinkedIn where I disseminated this information. I would share it out with the people into the community. This newsletter is still active. I think we're about nearly 6,000 subscribers now. Although for the last 5 or 6 months, I was out for a month and a half with COVID. For the last 6 months, it's been quiet. But there are things that are going to be happening there going forward. And I'm looking forward to getting engaged with the community once again. Well, how? Right. So what now? 2023 and beyond. One of my favorite psychologists is Albert Harold Maslow, who sadly died in June 1970. This triangle of his, you may have seen it, but not without this top piece here called self-transcendence. And in this triangle, he talks about how this is applied a lot to safety culture models as well. And you see at the bottom here, psychological needs, safety needs, etc. goes up. Self-actualization is all about individual potential. But for me, my vision is really a bit more towards this side, which is helping others. I'm not the one to ask if I'm helping others. I'd let others answer that on my behalf, but I hope I'm doing enough to share what I can to help the community as such. So I'm hoping that I'm more at this end of the triangle than in this part down here. And really, I'm not sort of driven in terms of commercial aspects or getting another job, because as I said, I'm semi-retired. For me, it's more about trying to bridge the gap between these two, self-transcendence and self-actualization. Those of you not familiar with Albert Harold Maslow's work, it's really worthwhile reading, especially if you're trying to figure out how can you sort of change culture in an organization. Because with psychological safety, you can be rest assured that you're going to be more at this end of the triangle. So the journey continues for me in that respect. My new journey, 2023 onwards, is where I have now got a platform that I've established. And this platform, I said earlier that I wanted to lessen my workload. One of the areas that I spent a lot of time and effort in was tinkering with websites. I am not into that anymore. I'm a content developer for people to learn and share stuff with. So why bother tinkering around with websites when you can get a lot of free stuff nowadays? Although this new platform I've got, I'm paying for it. It's the Thinkific site, and the new site is called Learn HSE. If you're interested, feel free, please go there, just subscribe, join up, whatever. There's no commitments. You will find a ton of free, what I call mini courses there, lots of information there. And literally, we only launched on the 8th of January. It took 5 to 6 months to develop it, the portal with Thinkific, and we're building on it slowly. The most important thing on this site, which is the centerpiece for me, is community. It's a bit like a LinkedIn sort of a format, but without all the nonsense that goes with it, the bullying, the trolling, the nonsense. The community there is going to be full of folks who really just want to share their knowledge and expertise. I'm hoping that in some way, we don't want to have thousands and thousands. It's not about competing with other platforms. I would rather have quality of discussions rather than quantity of people on there. So if people are keen to join and talk about their experiences, that's fine. People want to share some stuff on there, that's fine. So that community, I've called it a safe space for HSE practitioners. My painful journey and learnings are that leveraging digital media for me is super important in terms of how I want people to get involved in understanding how to do risk and safety management. But also, I don't want them to get buried with just boxed stuff that they watch and get bored out of their skulls with. I want them to understand that they watch, they then apply, they learn, they repeat. So rinse and repeat, keep doing that. And then hopefully they'll be in a much better position from an awareness perspective and application perspective. I know I went through it very fast. The bottom line there is that from a leveraging digital media perspective, find what it is that you're aiming for. What is it that you want to do? If what you're trying to do is change the safety culture in an organization or change how people are doing risk in a certain way, think about what it is that you need to put in place to make that happen. Is it active learning or passive learning or a combination of the two? Then take a step back and think about, well, what tools do I have to make that happen? What can I leverage on digital media? Can I use a course? Can I create quizzes? Can I create courses with quizzes? Can I do other things? How can I do it? There's a new bit of technology that's, I think, going to be a big player in the future, all about immersive ocular type technology. People are now, Google are working on these glasses, literally slimline glasses like this that you could wear and you'd feel that you're in a process plant or a working environment somewhere. Lots of things are going to happen. If we don't get involved now, if you're interested and take part in it, then you can just become a sort of an observer on the side and watch what happens. I remember if I go back about 30 years ago, I remember when I started to get involved with doing things like Word documents, or it was called Word Perfect back then. Some of you might remember it. And I always thought, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this or cope with it, because there were a lot of people there who just whizzed through it. And I then realized that either I could put it, shoulder up and get on board with this, or I'll be left behind. So the bottom line here is leverage digital media, learn what you need to do without drowning in this stuff, because it's so easy to drown as well. And it's not all about social media, Twitter, Facebook, and all the other things. It's all about having a small tribe, a small group that you want to sort of appeal to, and make sure that you make those changes happen. That's it from me. As I said, a short presentation. I welcome any questions, any comments, any thoughts. Sue, nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Sonny, for such an interesting and informative session. We do have some questions that have come in, and lots of them around social media, funnily enough. So somebody said that they're spending quite a lot of time managing their social media accounts, and they've got several of them. So they want to slim them down a bit. So how do you decide which is the best sort of channel to use?
Well, you have to. For me, I find LinkedIn is the best because I'm dealing with professional sort of content. If you're sort of looking at other things, firstly look at what market you're aiming for. Is it a local market? Is it a national market or an international market? If you're aiming for a local market, there are certain social medias that might be better. For example, where I live, there's one called Nextdoor, and a lot of people like tradesmen put their services on there. If you're looking for more national stuff, then you might want to look further afield, like Facebook groups or something else and so on. The problem with all of these things is you don't really know until you start to look at some of the statistics behind them, see where the traffic is coming from. And that is the problem. How do you do that without spending money on some social media marketing person? What I do is there's a company called AppSumo. Please make a note of that, AppSumo. AppSumo do deals. So they will have lots of things on there where people are brand new and selling their gadgets or gidgets. And that's how I get my lifetime deals. That's how I got Formuloo, for example. Sign up to AppSumo. There are others out there. I just use AppSumo. And you know, for $50, you might get the social media manager that I've got. I use a thing called Social Champ. And in Social Champ, I can have 30 social media platforms. I don't use 30, I only have 3 or 4. And I can schedule my content, but I can analyze which one gets more traction, which one is more popular, etc. 99% of the time, people get fed up with social media because they don't know when to post, they don't know where to post, they don't know who's watching or who should do this and so on and so forth. So you need some vehicle. So I use Social Champ. In the past, I've used Buffer. There's Hootsuite, but Hootsuite is blooming expensive, right? I wouldn't bother with them. Buffer is okay. They give you 3, I think, free social media platforms you can link up to. But for me, Social Champ cost me $60 2 years ago, and I still continue to use it. It's brilliant, right? So bottom line, if you want to know where your social media effort should be more, find out first who is actually clicking the stuff that you're putting out there, right? And don't just leave them hanging. Don't get them to click something, make it clickbait, and they get fed up. Take them somewhere where there is a form that they can fill out or something that can do. What is their interest? You know, if someone clicks something, there's a reason for it. You've ignited something in them. Find out what it is that you ignited, and you can follow up. Does that make sense?
Super, yeah, perfect sense to me. Thank you. So next question is, and this person said that it might be a difficult question to answer, but what digital leverage have you found to be the most effective?
Now that is a difficult question to answer. I have found LinkedIn to be the best in terms of community engagement. And specifically what I do on LinkedIn is I've joined a lot of groups because if you imagine a big sort of, I don't know, big sort of forest or I don't know, whatever you want to think about, nature reserve, there are watering holes, and you can go into a watering hole. It's like going to a party that you've not been invited to. Okay, you can go to some of these watering holes and you think, God, I don't really belong here, right? So the good thing about LinkedIn groups is you can find these groups, you can ask to join them, and if you've got specific content that you want to share, it's a great opportunity. For example, if I'm interested in selling something, say I'm a provider of services for risk assessment, there will be a group on there that says risk practitioners, right, or risk assessment. Just join the group. Make sure you don't abuse the group, but you know, don't over promote, because there's always a danger of doing that as well. But just every now and then, put a little message out there, a feeler out there, see what happens. So if you're selling professional services, LinkedIn is great. If you're selling things such as retail service and all those things, Facebook is good. Okay, so that for me, LinkedIn was the best. My YouTube channel also just grew exponentially simply because I was producing videos. If you want to produce videos, that's a good way as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Somebody's asked whether or not they should use different sort of social media or digital media for different types of content. I think that's sort of alluding to what you've just said, that use LinkedIn for, say, they're suggesting using LinkedIn just for their company news, but their Twitter account for, say, the day-to-day stuff. Is that something you would advise?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's okay. It's for mini blogging. If you have a huge Twitter following, I gave up on Twitter. I found it annoying, to be honest. If you're regularly doing stuff and you want to micro blog, that's great. But be prepared, because if you have a big following, I mean, my son had a football site, and he had an enormous number of Twitter followers, enormous. He was constantly on there, you know, and some of the comments are pathetic. You just have to be on there responding to them. And if you don't respond, then it just dies. But think of it as a fast flowing stream, okay? If you, whatever you put on there now, it will be gone within a few seconds. It's pointless. But on LinkedIn, it stays a little bit longer. It's got a slightly bigger and longer shelf life as well. My newsletter on LinkedIn just rapidly grew, and I used to post a video on there. People watched it. They then said, oh, let's go and have a look at this site, and it grew and grew and grew, organically grew like that. Other things you could do is you could tag with someone who has a podcast, for example. So if you're selling a particular thing or you've got an interest in something, join up with them and get involved with their media side. So you content will, you know, create more momentum as well. Don't know if I answered that okay. Was that?
Yeah, that's good. And that also builds that community, doesn't it? If you're tagging people and starting to build those learning communities and sharing expertise, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and one point you mentioned there, which is important, is learn how to tag people. There's a lot of people who don't know how to tag people on LinkedIn. They'll put something out there. I had one very popular guy across the planet, Dr. Dom. I won't say, well, Dr. Dominic Cooper. He is incredible on LinkedIn. He can tag 10, 20 people at the same time. I asked him, how the hell do you do that? He goes, oh, I've copied and pasted it all on one side, and I just do that. Yeah, so shortcuts, right? Find these shortcuts, put them to one side, because what you use today, you'll be using tomorrow, probably another day. Why think about, well, what did I do there? You know, just grab it and put it in. So I use a free thing called Evernote, right? And on Evernote, you can just dump stuff on there, pull it out when you want, put it onto the site when you want as well.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned podcasting, and excuse me, and somebody said that they could see how podcasts would work within their company to get messages across. How easy are they to do?
Yeah, well, L'Oreal came to us for doing that, because I think Malk at L'Oreal realized how quickly we grew. How easy are these to do? They're very easy. You don't need to spend a vast amount of money. You can even do it on these things, right? There's a free software you can download called Audacity, Audacity. Download Audacity. There's tons of YouTube videos on how to use Audacity. But basically what you're going to do is record whatever you need to do on here. If you're going to have guests, you'll need dual microphones, etc. I have all that fancy stuff here. I don't even use them anymore, because Audacity will polish it up for you. It can take away background noise and everything. Audacity is free, right? It's open source software as well. So if you're going to do a podcast, dead easy. Find what you want to talk about, do a recording, spend a bit of time polishing it up on Audacity. In terms of hosting it and where do you want to do all of those things, there's multiple ways of doing it. I would not host it on your website, okay? Because unless you've got a super duper structure, your website will not be capable of parsing it and processing quickly enough. You may have to go to a third-party provider. What I tended to do was, there are some free providers who'd put it on there for you, Spotify, for example, or any of the others. And then there's one called, it begins with L, I can't remember it now, but they will charge you money for it. If you pay, you get higher quality, right? They will also take out some of the background and polish it up for you as well. So I'm happy to give more thoughts on this. I'm going to restart a podcast later this year, so we may go back to. Word of warning, very time consuming, okay? Another suggestion is, don't do too many. Try and do one per month to start with. L'Oreal, when they started, wanted to do one every 2 weeks, and we eventually ended up doing one every week, because by the time you get people together to talk about things and do things and polish it, it takes time. Plus you've got a day job as well.
Okay, thank you. And another question is about how regularly should you engage with digital media?
Oh, yeah, very good question. If you're in groups on LinkedIn, the group owners will not like you flooding their group with messages every day. I have seen people flooding every hour the same nonsense, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is just too much, and you block them, right? If you try and aim for at least twice per week, but I'll caveat this by saying you don't know until you know what the stats are, right? If you post on a Wednesday on LinkedIn at about 1 p.m. in the afternoon UK time, that's usually a good spot because in Asia, they're about 5.5, 6 hours ahead. In the US, they're 5.5, 6 hours behind, depending on the eastern seaboard or whatever side. But that's a nice spot. And I found it stays in the pipeline a little bit longer. So what you can then see is go on LinkedIn and see, well, how many impressions did it have? And if it had a lot of impressions, you might want to repost it with your social media campaigner like Social Champ or Buffer or Hootsuite. And they won't allow you to repost the exact stuff. You might have to change a couple of words, but you can repost it, right? So find out where the sweet spots are. Don't go for 50,000 tweets or whatever per week. You're really trying to get people to follow you, and they won't follow you if you're going to be a pain in the backside, right? Deluge them with stuff they don't want to hear all the time. Just find out what works for you. Try 2 or 3 a week. See, first of all, that you can fit it in with the workload you've got, because it might not work for you. And if you use a social media manager like those softwares that I mentioned, you can schedule them as well. You don't have to be on there doing it at that time.
Okay. Yeah, I use for myself. I use TweetDeck for that. My
Yeah, another one.
schedule
Yes.
things, which
Yeah.
works really well. So you don't have to. I spend a couple of hours just scheduling the tweets throughout the week, and then I can leave it,
Yeah.
and it just
Yeah.
happens magically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can actually get even cleverer now. You can create an Excel file, which you can upload as a CSV file for a whole week, for a whole month, right? So you can spend one morning on a Sunday saying, right, for February, I'm going to do all these posts. Where do I want it to go to? You create the CSV file, just upload it, and there you go.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And somebody has commented that they would like to know the site address for Learning HSE.
Right, okay, www.learnhse.com.
That's super, thank you. I think those are all the questions we've got at the moment.
Okay.
Somebody would like to say that they've really enjoyed the presentation, and they've come away from it with a number of resources, and would like to say thanks to you for giving up your time.
It's a pleasure, and thank you so much. I know it's not what I would call a mainstream topic for IIRSM as a risk and safety thing, but I want to get the message across that the two do join up, all right? You do need to use digital media if we're going to go forward in the future, especially you don't know what you don't know, all right? You don't know what's going to happen with the COVID stuff that's around. We have to be embracing this in a big way, even more than what we already have.
Yeah, that's super. Thank you. Well, thank you, Sonny, for sharing your knowledge with us today. Thank you for everybody that's joined us as well. I'll put the recording of the session onto the IIRSM Resource Hub, so you can catch up or recap on anything in your own time. So I think we'll end the webinar here. Have a really good rest of the day to everybody, and we hope to see you again soon at another IIRSM webinar.
Can I just say, Sue, thank you so much for allowing me to be the first one this year. I'm very grateful. I really applaud what you're doing, connecting, sharing, and learning. And I know how much effort it takes. So thank you so much for having me on and sharing my journey.
Oh, our absolute pleasure, Sonny. Thank you ever so much for giving up your time today.
Right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.